show. I'm wondering if you can just, first of all, talk about the contrast that we're seeing between these two candidates, the contrast in terms of how they're running their campaigns, and also the contrast just in terms of the sense of confidence that they are emoting to the American people. And then what are you looking for in the debate tonight for the vice presidential candidates?
Well, Mika, thank you first for having me. I think what we're seeing is a stark contrast between two presidential candidates. Donald Trump, that only cares about himself, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that are actually focused on the people. And we have example after example after example where we're seeing the Trump administration attack marginalized communities, attack the LGBTQ community specifically. And just this week alone, when we look at what we've seen, transgender violence, we have confirmed at least 31 transgender people killed in this country, violence that has been spurred by the Trump administration. We also have seen a war against marriage equality by two justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, and LGBTQ people are suffering from COVID. So the Trump administration has been creating a climate where marginalized communities and LGBTQ communities specifically are being the target. And then you look at the other end of the spectrum, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are actually focused on people. They're focused on making sure that all of us are actually represented, and the Trump administration has not been doing that. What we're looking forward to in this vice presidential debate is making sure that Kamala Harris is able to highlight the record of the Trump administration, the Trump-Pence administration, and what the Harris-Biden administration is going to do. We have 1 out of 5 people, LGBTQ people, living in poverty. 17% of LGBTQ people lack health care coverage. LGBTQ people are 50% more likely not to actually to have a pay cut in this COVID-19 pandemic. People are suffering. And the Trump administration is looking the other way. They're focused on their individual policies. They're not focused on people. And that is what we are focused on. We need to make sure that everyone understands the stakes in this election. Mika, I think earlier today, folks were talking about, the justices issuing this opinion, which effectively says, is an attack on the relationships of same-sex couples all over this country. There are hundreds of thousands of people who are married. And now we have an opinion that says, well, we're questioning whether or not marriage equality should continue being the law of the land. This election is the election of our lives. And we need to make sure that LGBTQ people and people of color are protected.
So you tweeted, I have no doubt Amy Coney Barrett would join Thomas, Lita, and others to chip away at LGBTQ rights, voting rights, reproductive rights, and healthcare rights. She gave us a roadmap in her writings. Can you tell us about that roadmap?
Sure. So Amy Coney Barrett has said that she agrees with the dissenters, Alito and Thomas. She says she agrees with them in the Obergefell case. For many people who may not know, the Obergefell case said that there is a constitutional right to marry, and that constitutional right includes same-sex couples. Coney Barrett has also called into question whether or not reproductive rights are protected under the Constitution. Coney Barrett has taken the position that religious liberties, or religious exemptions, I should say, should effectively supersede individual rights. And that is a huge concern for us. Religion has been used to justify colonization. Religion has been used as a tool to support slavery. Religion has been used as a tool to support separate but equal. Religion has been used as a tool to ban interracial marriages. And so we have to be careful that individual rights are not going to suffer at the hands of a newly constituted U.S. Supreme Court. And Amy Coney Barrett has told us in her writings as a college professor or as a law school professor, as well as a judge, that she has concerns about the Affordable Care Act, as an example. We have some significant concerns that the Affordable Care Act...
I'm always sleeping, and I usually... I'm in love with the shape of you, push and pull like a magnitude, although my heart is...
Joining us now, Democratic member of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. It's great to see you. A lot to talk
about.
That
was a very powerful ad. That was incredible.
I was riveted. Looking ahead at the debate tonight, it's just, I mean, the circumstances are unbelievable. The White House is in the middle of an outbreak. I'm trying to think of how Mike Pence defends that. And any concerns you have about the debate happening, given that the White House is in the midst of an outbreak?
Well, I'm glad the debate is going forward. Kamala and I got to be close friends on that campaign trail, and I know she's going to do a really good job tonight. She's someone that shows grace under pressure, and that's what you want in a leader right now in the middle of a pandemic. And at the same time, we know Mike Pence is a good debater. I happen to be sitting in the front row of his vice presidential debate with Tim Kaine. So we know he's a good debater. But what Kamala has on her side are the facts. She's got on her side the facts that she and Joe Biden have a plan to not just build back better when it comes to our economy. Moody's just gave the numbers that their plan would create 7 million more jobs than the one put forth by the Trump administration, but also the mismanagement of this pandemic by this administration. So Mike Pence may be a good debater, but the facts and the American people are on the side of truth and justice this time, and that means Biden-Harris.
Has there been a lot of debate prep amidst all this chaos? Any sense, or what do you think the strategy should be moving forward for Kamala Harris tonight?
Well, I think she's just got to make the case for Joe Biden. That is important, and she's good at doing that. And I somehow have a feeling that she won't be interrupting the moderator 145 times like someone did in the last debate. I think you're just going to see her calmly putting forward the case for why we need a president who has compassion, why we need a president who is going to be able to govern with competence and actually put in place a plan when it comes to COVID. And that means a national testing strategy, that means following the science, and that means contact tracing. And then that gets us to a place where we can have our businesses open more consistently. I just saw a study by Yelp, 800 small businesses a day are closing. And this president just announced he was withdrawing from any negotiations on a COVID package. I think that just gives you the sense of the chaos that we're seeing over in the White House.
Senator Klobuchar, it's Willie Geist. Good morning. I want to pick up on that point about the president announcing on Twitter that Republicans should withdraw from these negotiations about a COVID package. He saw the Dow collapse. I'm sure he heard from Senate Republicans who said we can't do that. And then he came out and said, okay, well, let's do a standalone bill that gets a $1,200 check to American families. What is your assessment of where these negotiations, if we can call them that anymore, where they are, and what are people in your state? I just asked Senator Coons this about Delaware. What are people in Minnesota telling you when they own a small business or their family is struggling and they've been waiting now for months for these negotiations to be resolved?
I think they're actually quite in shock because they saw Speaker Pelosi valiantly trying to reignite these negotiations with a recalcitrant Republican Senate. And she got a bill passed that was significantly less money than the original bill, but she was still willing to move forward. And the Democrats in the Senate want to move forward, and the White House seemed interested. So I thought, okay, here we go. And the bill that she passed actually has that relief for restaurants, for stages, for theaters, and for small venues for music, in addition to, of course, the testing and the help for small governments and everything else that we need across the country. It's all in there. 33 states are seeing spikes right now. So what happens in the midst of this pandemonium? The president backs away, probably doing the bidding for Mitch McConnell, and now seeing the stock market tank. This is all just predictable. He starts just tweeting stuff out. Oh, let's do this standalone. Let's do this standalone. We have a package ready to go, and it's on the White House and Mitch McConnell to come to the table again. And meanwhile, they have chosen to use the precious time for the American people right now to ram through a Supreme Court justice instead of getting help to Americans during this pandemic.
So
it's simply outrageous.
Are you, Senator, and your Senate colleagues resigned to the distinct possibility, or maybe even the fact that there just won't be a deal before the election unless a new president comes in, unless Joe Biden is elected, that the people of Minnesota will sit here for another 3-4 months without COVID relief?
I just can't resign myself to this. I know neighbors and friends juggling their kids on their laps while they're trying to do work, schools opening and closing, people that don't have broadband. I don't resign myself to anything. And if they're making us come back for this hearing after deeming the Senate unsafe and that's why they shut it down, that's what I'm going to ask them. So why aren't you working on COVID relief right now instead of doing this? But that's where I'm headed next week, is back to Washington. Not to help the people of my state, but to do this. It's just wrong. And believe me, we're going to keep pushing them. So no, I'm not resigned to anything.
So let's talk about the hearings, the potential hearings to deal with Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Republicans want that to happen. There's a lot of barriers, self-created, self-inflicted barriers, including a lot of people getting coronavirus from super spreader events held by the White House itself and the president himself. And yet they want to keep going. What is your position on that? I mean, it is a constitutional right. I mean, they're going back on their word as to whether or not they would do this so close to an election, but it is, their lawful right, I guess. But how physically possible is it to try and get this done?
They right now have 3 of the members of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate have COVID. Just coming down with it, by the way, last week at the end of the week. We didn't find out about this until Friday. So now we know that they have COVID. 2 of them are on the Judiciary Committee. It's unclear if they are going to be there. Of course, they should not be there. And so we have called for a delay of the hearing. The hearing should happen after the election. That is the precedent that Senator McConnell set, that the people choose a president, and then that president in an election year should choose the nominee. We are still holding by their precedent that they set and calling for a delay in addition because of safety reasons. But people don't always, these guys are doing lunches. They take their masks off and they have lunches. So we don't even know the full extent.
Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He's a member of the Senate Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees. He's got a new piece in Foreign Affairs magazine titled "A Bipartisan Foreign Policy is Still Possible." We'll talk about that in just a moment. Senator Coons, good morning. I want to begin by asking you about what's going on in the Congress right now in terms of COVID stimulus, COVID relief. We had the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell saying it is critical to get something into the system for this economy. As you know, it is critical to small business owners and families in the state of Delaware. The president coming out publicly and killing the negotiations effectively yesterday in a tweet. So where does Congress stand right now, most importantly, in getting money into the hands of people who need it?
Well, we've been working for months in the Congress to put together a package that we can get passed. As you know, 6 months ago, we unanimously passed in the Senate the CARES Act, which delivered about $2.3 trillion worth of relief and is what's keeping our economy from collapsing. 4 months ago, the House passed a bold, substantial relief package, which Majority Leader McConnell never took up seriously in the Senate. We have waited for week after week after week without Republicans in the Senate coming to the table to negotiate. Speaker Pelosi ultimately in the last few weeks has been negotiating directly with White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, with Senator Schumer, the minority leader in the Senate. And it's been very difficult to get to any agreement, even as Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer have agreed to come down by $1 trillion from that initial House package. This is just another example of how difficult it is to negotiate with President Trump. It's like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. He's canceling all negotiations and then within a few short hours saying, no, we urgently need more money to be enacted tomorrow. We are not in session this week because of the COVID outbreak that has infected 3 of my colleagues. Instead of doing what we should be doing, which is negotiating a final COVID relief package for the American people, the Senate majority and the Judiciary Committee are racing ahead with a Supreme Court confirmation.
As you know, talking to your constituents, people in Delaware, people out in the country, they're not much interested in the politics of how this is happening. They just know they need some help and they need it fast. So what do you say to that small business owner in Wilmington or somewhere else in your state who's saying, I'm about to go under unless you guys do something and do it fast?
Well, that's literally a conversation I'm having every day as folks I know here are texting me, emailing me, calling my office saying, when are you going to get this next relief package done? I'm on the Small Business Committee. I helped write some of the PPP provisions that helped millions of businesses and nonprofits stay open in the CARES Act. We have a next version of that, a bipartisan next version of that ready to go. But frankly, when the House tried to pass it, it was blocked, and the White House, until President Trump's late night tweet last night, had refused to move forward with piecemeal solutions. We still have the unresolved and critical issue of funding state and local governments, which have already laid off more than 1.5 million public employees. The middle of a pandemic is no time to have teachers and paramedics, nurses, and police officers facing layoffs because of the ongoing recession caused by President Trump's bungled mishandling of this pandemic.
Do you think those $1,200 checks, the way that President Trump described it late last night, those standalone checks, the bill, is that a possibility? Is that something real that could get into the pockets of your constituents?
It would distribute, I think, roughly $400 billion to the American people. I'll remind you, President Trump insisted on putting his name on it the last time, something unprecedented in the distribution of federal support and relief in comparable recessions. That may be something that's considered today. Bluntly, Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer have tried their best to make progress in these negotiations, and the unpredictability of President Trump's response and the unwillingness of the Republican majority in the Senate to focus on this pandemic relief package rather than the confirmation of Judge Barrett to the Supreme Court has made progress very difficult.
So let's talk about that confirmation process. Senator Mitch McConnell says he wants to go ahead, starting the hearings in some form on Zoom. As you mentioned, 3 of your Senate colleagues have come down with COVID-19. Some of them say they expect to be well enough to be back perhaps in person at a hearing for Judge Amy Coney Barrett. How do you see this playing out? As you know, Republicans have the votes to confirm her. What does this process look like to you over the next few weeks?
Well, we should not be racing ahead with this partisan process. There is no precedent in our nation's history for the Senate holding a confirmation hearing for a Supreme Court nominee this close, just 27 days before a presidential election, where people are already voting in more than half the states. Nonetheless, the majority committee chairman, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, is insisting on holding a confirmation hearing and an initial vote next week. If the Senate is too unsafe for us to be there in person this week to vote on judges, it's unsafe for us to be holding this confirmation hearing for Judge Barrett. I am still preparing for these upcoming hearings. I've been consulting with my legal team. I've been reading her opinions and law review articles, and I'm increasingly convinced that she's even more conservative than Justice Scalia, for whom she clerked on the Supreme Court, and she has demonstrated a willingness to reverse long-settled precedent. I look forward to questioning her more about that, and I think the American people need to realize President Trump himself said the only reason he was choosing this judge to be a justice and pressing for her to be seated before the election was so that she could participate in decisions about the election if it is closely contested, and so she could be seated to help overturn the Affordable Care Act in the Supreme Court hearing scheduled for November 10th. It is a bitter irony that Justice Ginsburg dedicated her life to gender equality and the provision of the Affordable Care Act that protects women from discrimination based on pre-existing conditions, including pregnancy or literally just being a woman. This is a key feature of the Affordable Care Act that protects all American women from discrimination by insurance companies. That's on the docket. That's on the ballot. A vote for Judge Barrett is a vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act. That's what I'll be trying to lay bare in the upcoming hearings, which we frankly should be delaying until after this election.
So you disagree with Judge Barrett on major policy issues, obviously, but do you think she's qualified as a judge?
I think she is qualified as a judge. I think she's going to be an engaging candidate. But frankly, what matters here is not whether she's taught at a well-regarded law school or whether she answers questions well. What matters is her judicial philosophy, how she will change the balance on the court, and what the consequences will be for tens or hundreds of millions of Americans. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It is stunning that the Trump administration is in the Supreme Court trying to take away health care protections from millions and millions of Americans.